On to Manchester City. What's the current situation, Pete, with their club, with their alleged 115 FFP charges?
Yeah, well, this is the ongoing elephant in the room, I think, probably with the Premier League. Obviously, Richard Masters has come out and said that a date is set, but wouldn't publicly reveal it when that would be set. I think we won't get a verdict probably for at least another year or more, 2025. And obviously, it's caused a lot of consternation with a lot of Manchester City's rivals that nothing's happened, and obviously Everton and Nottingham Forest, as we spoke earlier in the show, there feel why they have been punished before Manchester City, who have had these charges hanging over them now for a while. Obviously, their case is slightly more complex. 115 charges they're facing, and over that 9-year time frame, I think from 2009 to 2018. But in that time, I think they've won 7 Premier League titles, so they're still going on, winning silverware, able to spend money, and I think that causes a bit of discontent among rival fans that still nothing's been done over these charges. And obviously we had, was it Stefan Orson, I think, who was saying, who's former Manchester City employee, suggesting that if they are found guilty of these charges, facing certain relegation. I'm not too sure about that, but yeah, it needs to be sorted sooner rather than later. And delaying it to 2025 is not going to do anybody any good apart from Man City.
And do you think relegation would be fair, Keith? Is that a fair, provided that all the charges are effectively approved and are proved? Do you think relegation is then is necessary punishment?
Well, one thing I'd caution here is we're talking about 115 charges, and everybody says, well, that's such a huge number and it's so complex. As I understand it, there are probably only 3 or 4 categories that those 115 charges come into. So maybe it isn't that complex after all. I mean, there are certain, multiple charges within certain categories. And I'll come back to my point that I think the Premier League should have got additional legal resources at the time to have handled this, as I mentioned earlier. Relegation, I think if it is proven to be as egregious as it supposedly is, then I think relegation must be there. We saw it in Scotland before with Rangers, with their EBT issues. So it's not the first time it's happened, and look, again, I don't have knowledge of all the actual charges, but it would seem to be pretty serious at certain levels. And my biggest worry, as I mentioned again earlier, is that there'll be a political fix somehow to try and get this resolved, and whether the changing of the rules will happen again, and all of a sudden there'll be a negotiated settlement with Man City, I don't know. I'm really concerned about governmental interference on this one. I really am.
Pete, what do you reckon? Is relegation fair? Is a transfer ban for 5 years? How do you sanction 115 alleged charges if they are all proved?
Imagine it's going to be a hefty punishment, whatever it is, if those charges are approved and they are found guilty. Manchester City, as I said, we've had it previously up in Scotland when Rangers were relegated for their financial irregularities. So if Manchester City have broken the rules, and there are 115 of them, I think it's got to be something as hefty as relegation. Obviously, Manchester City have denied all the charges and will fight all the way to try and ensure that they aren't punished as severely as some people have suggested. Obviously, they were charged by UEFA and banned from the Champions League, but then that was suspended and everything else, so they escaped punishment in that one, and they'll be hoping to escape punishment, I think, from the Premier League over these charges as well. So it's, as I said, it's a difficult one. I think a lot of obviously Manchester City's rivals would love to see them relegated, because it would make it a more level playing field for them to go on and win silverware and everything else. But yeah, Manchester City, as Keith's mentioned earlier, are armied up with lots of legal teams now, and they will fight the case, and they will have confidence, having won against UEFA, that they can also win against the Premier League.
And Keith, now we know, of course, as you mentioned, Everton's verdict set to be announced mid-February. Following the second charge as well, we still don't know when that Manchester City case is going to really take place. As Pete mentioned, could be as 2025, could be as early as the end of this year, would remain to be seen. What are your thoughts around that and the delay of this process? I know you mentioned earlier in the show that you'd like to have had that finished first, but now we're not in that position. How do we speed up this process so it doesn't just drag on and on like it feels it is? Well,
this is the worry. It becomes a battle of budget and who can afford to hire the KCs, and that's going to. It could well be that Everton, having to spend so much on the appeals now, breach financial fair play again because of the legal bills that they've got. It's absolutely ridiculous. And Man City, look, I don't know. I mean, look, Everton are playing them on at the weekend. If Everton lose, then that's 3 points against a team that's facing 115 charges, and yet we've had the sanction placed on us already. I mean, look, there's so many inequities in this that's what worries me about the integrity of the league. And that if we haven't got sporting integrity, then we have nothing.
And Pete, what did you make that they broke the record for the Premier League wage bill last season? And they also, of course, announced a record in revenue. What are your thoughts around that?
It's no surprise that they're breaking the record for wages. They've got the best squad in the Premier League, probably the best squad in Europe right now. And so if you want those best players, you're going to have to pay the big wages. Obviously, Erling Haaland was a big arrival on astronomical money, it's suggested, rather than what is actually been out there and what he's getting. It seems like he's getting a lot more. But yeah, Manchester City, they want to be up there competing for the highest honour, so that means you're going to have a high wage bill, because they will be competing for the best and most expensive players in the world and everything else. So that's no surprise. The squad's stacked with internationals. When you've got £100 million players sat on your bench like Jack Grealish, that tells you everything you need to know of the strength of Manchester City, and probably then the wages that they have to pay for these world-class stars as well. So we shouldn't be surprised by that. So I think Manchester City will continue to do that. They will be active in these transfer markets and right up there looking to sign the best players. And when you want to sign the best players, you have to pay the best wages to get them.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.